What Sri Aurobindo tells us in Life Divine is written for the human intellect. It's not written by the human intellect, that's important. It's written by the highest level of consciousness that he could reach and allow to descend through a silent mind. But it was written to render highest knowledge, you can say supramental knowledge, in terms that would be accessible, intelligible to the highest faculty we have now, which is the thinking mind or the intellectual mind, whatever we want to call it. Synthesis is not written for the intellect. It's not written to the intellect. If Life Divine gives us the theoretical knowledge of knowledge with a capital K, that is the integral knowledge. He gives us the theoretical knowledge of what the integral knowledge is, and politely tells us when we've gone all the way to book 2, chapter part 2, that though you may understand it and think you have it, you cannot have this knowledge with the intellect. Even though I've drawn you along all the time and you've been patiently learning and memorizing and talking about it, you can only have it by experience. You can only have it by a change of consciousness. But this is what the intellect can understand of it. And that intellectual understanding, that mental understanding has value and power to help us move beyond and not rely on the intellect. Maybe we could say that one of the underlying motives was not so much to get us to supermind, but to convince us that the intellect is not the way that we're going to rise further. We have to go beyond it. Synthesis is not written to that highest developed mental faculty. It's not a book of theoretical knowledge. It's a book of practical knowledge for applying the theory in our lives, which is what yoga is all about. If at all it's written, I don't know what, I may not be correct about this, but I would say it's written more to the emotional mind or even the vital mind. But of course, it's written to he addresses us in all levels, but it's centrally written to reach the deepest part in us that we can, which has an aspiration for progress. Through our emotions, through our experience is vital. It's the mind in life, whether it's the vital mind or the mental emotions, I don't know, or both. Savitri is not written to either of those. Savitri is not an explanation. It's not even a practical guide all. It is spiritual experience. It is his spiritual experience and mother's spiritual experience rendered by the highest, from the highest level that he could do so, whether it's over mental or supramental at different times, as experience to us. I believe his experience and mother's experience. In fact, mother used to say, when he writes lines, he used to write in the night and dictate to disciples in the night. She would come back down in the morning and read the lines that had been written. She said, this is what happened to me last night. This is my experience he's writing. He hadn't even met her yet. It's experience, it's spiritual experience. And that spiritual experience written from a mantra, in mantra, from the highest consciousness, translated or expressed in English, has a power for experience. It has a power to bring the experience that the mind can understand and the heart can aspire for. So we are into the book of practice now. He does definitely give some intellectual explanations at points, and he definitely describes experience as far as it can be described in prose. But his main point is to give us the guide to the methods and the approach. And that raises the fundamental question, what is yoga? This is a synthesis of yoga. He's writing about a yoga. So what is yoga? And that's the fundamental issue for the book. Would anybody like to venture? What does he mean by yoga? What are we trying to synthesize?
He says all life is yoga. So that's what I could think of, sir.
That's true. He says that, and that's a main topic of the first chapter. But that doesn't tell us. Then we got yoga as life. Then we have to ask the question, what is But what does it mean when he says all life is yoga? First of all, we must know what he means by yoga. Then we can decide whether we're doing yoga or life is all yoga or everything is yoga. What does it mean?
So from what I understand from those words, sir, that it's not about seeking any particular thing or a particular god or anything. Every single thing in which you do or which you think of, that should be consecrated to God and the divine. That is when all life is yoga. Whether it is like the milk boiling or coming down the stairs or anything. So everything and anything which you do or you think of should be consecrated to the divine, and that makes all life yoga, is what I understood. Not sure.
We'll come to all life is yoga very soon. But what is yoga? What does it mean?
Sir,
Yeah.
Sir, it is like previously they follow the moksha, that is like sannyasis will follow the moksha path, and normal life people will lead a normal life. And so Bhagavan here wanted to synthesis both. That is like in life we need to follow the higher principle, and we need to be like as Sukumari ma'am was saying, every act should be like, it should be a divine act, like the maximum best what we can understand to our knowledge, we have to work on that.
I'm still waiting for all those things are true, but I'm still waiting for a definition of yoga. What do we mean by the word? It's the topic of the book.
Self-development of divine nature within us.
Did you hear her?
Yes.
It's a self-development of divine nature within us.
It's the self-development of divine nature in us. That's good. Actually, the word, yes, Vishnu?
I was going to say it's similar to what Vidya said, realizing the divine in us or reaching the divine inside us and manifesting that in our form.
Actually, the word means union.
Mm-hmm.
Union, yoke,
Mm-hmm.
in English. It's union of the human consciousness with the divine consciousness. That's the conventional idea. We want to take our consciousness and reach and identify and merge it into the divine consciousness. That's the conventional or traditional concept of yoga. Sri Aurobindo goes beyond that and says it is to allow the divine consciousness to express through us, so that we become a center of the divine consciousness. But either way, whether we go there or it comes here, the concept of union is there.
Mm-hmm.
All of the yoga is that our consciousness becomes the divine consciousness. So what he tells us in this book is that the traditional yoga, which is the highest knowledge that's been known to human beings, developing itself over centuries and millennia, acquired a very great and rare treasure. But in doing so, it took the course that all manifestation takes, that leads to the need for renewal, revival, and eventually synthesis. So he starts off on the first page, the first chapter in the introduction, where he talks about life and yoga. That's the first chapter, is life and yoga. He says that for anything to manifest itself in the world, it needs to develop form. We've been using another word for that in our discussions the last 8 months. It needs to be organized. Organization is a form. And you remember, I've repeated so many times, I think everybody would remember, his line, or paraphrased his line from the last chapter of Life Divine: life evolves by consciousness. Consciousness evolves and expresses itself and acquires power of accomplishment through organization. That's the form. That's the awareness of the divine, the awareness that there is a divine. The soul's aspiration to reach the divine is the consciousness. But to convert that into something that can be practically applied to realize that divine consciousness, it has to be reduced to a form or an organization, or we can call it a method. And the method by which the soul has been seeking and discovering ways to realize the divine and acquire union to the divine consciously is what he means and what we mean by yoga. And in the course of anything, whether it's the aspiration for Indian freedom, when Sri Aurobindo released that call for total independence from the British through the aspiration for Indian freedom, it was expressing the consciousness of the aspiration. But at that time, it had no form. There was no organization through which that consciousness could be systematically channeled. The Congress, National Congress existed, but it was not existing for that purpose. Sri Aurobindo tried to redirect the aspiration and intention of the National Congress to go for total independence. When Gandhi came, and in later time, 10 years later, the Congress, the National Congress, became a freedom movement, an organized effort to translate the aspiration, I'm using the word consciousness for clarity, into power. And when that consciousness acquired the power of a national organization, so when Gandhi said, don't buy this, don't do this, resign your jobs, go and make salt, weave khadi, don't buy the imported goods, don't relate to the foreigner, don't cooperate, don't pay taxes, that organization acquired a power for Indian freedom. But the power came not from the organization. The power comes from the consciousness which is expressed through the organization and the idea. Before that, there was an organization, but it was saying, let's be friendly with the British and let them give us a little more respect and some local power that we can exercise. Sri Aurobindo said, no, this must be total freedom, total independence. India must come up. The soul of India must come to the surface. We need a categorical rejection of all compromise, even if it means war. We must be totally free and independent. They must quit India. The movement was made possible by the aspiration and the ideal. But the movement acquired force because it was an organization. What India did to acquire its freedom, the yogis did to realize divine, union with the divine. They had the aspiration, they had experience. They knew there was a divine consciousness. They had isolated experiences of it. Unique people experienced it as light or peace or joy or ananda or power. What they did over millennia was to acquire methods, how to organize our pursuit of that consciousness. By which means can we realize it? And so they developed methods, and each method became a path of yoga, eventually a school of yoga. And the more they did that, the more they discovered there's not one way to realize the divine. There's not one path. You can discover and realize the divine through works, karma yoga. You can discover it and realize it through devotion, bhakti yoga. You can seek it and realize it through knowledge, jnana yoga. These are the triple path of the Gita. You can do it through complete control of your physical body and life forces, nervous energies, through hatha yoga, pranayama, releasing the kundalini from the chakras. You can do it through a more psychological method of your mind, detaching from your thoughts, analysis of Raja Yoga. There are so many methods by which the finite ego can dispense with itself and reach the infinite divine. And over time, each of these methods, hundreds of methods, maybe thousands of paths, diverged from each other and became more and more specialized. And each generation of guru developed in a line. Either he followed his own guru, or he modified it or split away from his guru and developed it along different lines, until the Indian youth today, or the foreigner today, when he wants to know what is yoga, he can be traveling around India for 20 years and not discover all of the schools of yoga or the methods of yoga or even the definitions of yoga. And when I met Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who founded the TM, which Krishnamurti calls silly, it is silly. And Maharishi understands, see, that we don't want to confuse the Westerner by telling him all these things and everything. You give him a simple answer. You sit down 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening, repeat the mantra, you'll realize the transcendental consciousness in 5 years. And that is yoga. And people were asking him, because by that time we had read something, and we said, well, you see, I read the Gita, and Krishna is great. He talks about so many things. Maharishi said, no, he's only talking about transcendental meditation. I wondered, where does it say in the Gita to sit down for 20 minutes in the morning and the evening and repeat a mantra? He tells Arjuna to go out on the battlefield and fight and kill his relatives. I don't follow how this is that. It was an effort to, and he convinced millions of people. And I was one of the lucky ones that at least followed it for a year and learned how to sit quietly before realizing this is not all there is to yoga. But the point is, he starts off, whenever, this is what happens with everything. It happens with freedoms, political parties. It happens with yoga. It happens with everything we create. It happens with subject matter. You know, when the first universities were created, they in Europe, when the first university, you can turn it down. You can turn it off if you want. You'd be comfortable. I'm freezing her out. turn this up a little. If it's still cool, you
No,
just signal.
it's okay. Absolutely.
My temperature goes up when I talk. See, when Harvard University and Oxford and Cambridge were founded, they essentially had 5 subjects.
Sir,
Huh?
excuse me, sir.
What's that?
Yoga, Bhagavan says, yoga is the realization of one's capacity of harmony, communion, or unity with God.
Communion with God.
Communion or unity with God. He says, the infinite in some form or idea must be admitted. So to be in tune with the infinite, that is harmony.
To be in tune with the infinite. To be in tune with the infinite is not to be in tune with the ego. It's to be identified with the infinite. It's to want thy will, not my will. It doesn't mean to have the infinite in tune with us. It means we should be in tune with the infinite. We all want Mother to be in tune with us, to know what we want and give it to us before we ask. That's not what they mean by yoga. But it's the beginning of a relationship anyway. Vishnu, can you put it in the context of this discussion in any way? Or is that stretching it? It is
I'll try.
in the context.
Yeah.
We're talking about a method.
Mm-hmm.
A method to raise our consciousness.
Yes. So I also did my rounds of reading about other different types of meditation before coming back to integral yoga. So yesterday, when you were describing about how Darcy and Elizabeth, not quite literally, but like how when they took a step back from their emotions, and when Lizzie actually tried to understand Darcy from a different perspective, I understood that what they were both doing was distancing themselves from their vital emotions and then trying to take a wider perspective. So then for me, consecration mostly has been, well, for example, I'm experiencing anger. I consecrate from that feeling. I can sense that when I feel anger, I'm strongly identified with anger, and then I call Mother from there. And then I was wondering, maybe I should take a step back, detach myself from that anger, and then offer that to Mother. So I asked Gary Uncle what the difference is in these two different methods. Because when I detach myself from anger, I also think that I detach myself from the thoughts that cause it, the vital emotions that cause it. So it gives me, I feel like it gives me a higher perspective, right? And is that more powerful than calling or than consecrating it from the vital and from the mind? So that was the question.
And I didn't ask you a question. What's your experience?
So I've noticed that when I disassociate myself from the emotion and the thought, it's much more calm. I feel like I let for a greater realization to happen. But while I'm calling from the vital center, I feel like it's hard to describe. I feel like I still feel the energy. I still feel the taste of that. I don't know how to describe. I still feel like that the strong attachment to that that emotion, and I feel like it takes several times, multiple tries to be able to consecrate that.
And my answer to you on the call was, there's not a right and wrong. There's what works for you. If you happen to have taken to some particular branch of yoga in the Himalayas or in the South or something like that, you might have gotten a guru who said it doesn't matter, you can be as angry as you want. Just be devoted to God. Or Your problem is you're attached to the world. Go and sit in a cave and detach yourself from everything. And you have to give up the family. You have to give up relationships with people. All of that is the Maya. And you go and you'll get peaceful living in the forest. And you must shed all those thoughts and all those feelings and all those reactions and all those preferences, and only seek silence or recognize the illusory Maya of existence, or worship the divine in your soul, or do Hatha Yoga and draw yantras on the ground for 8 hours or 10 hours a day, or repeat a mantra 100,000 times a day. You won't have chance to be angry. You won't have energy or opportunity to be angry. Don't think about this, you do that. There are so many paths. I asked you what you feel when you do it, because ultimately the test is what's your experience. Anything may be good. Anything may work. It may work for me. It may work for somebody else. It may work for you some other time. What works now? And this brings us to the point that fundamentally, all the paths of yoga, all the methods of yoga. I remember when I was the first 1 year in Pandi in the ashram, visitors used to come and they say, when are the meditation classes? And can you give me the book of the, which is the mantras, and where do I get initiation and all of that? I said, there is none of that. I came here for yoga. I came here for initiation. Yes, you can be here and do yoga. No, what's the method? You better read the books because it doesn't fit into any particular. Is it an asana? Is it hatha yoga? Is it karma yoga? Is it chanting? Is it satsang? Which is the method you're following here? Yes, all of those things may be good. It depends. The point is that what Sri Aurobindo said, I was saying when we got to the question that that when the universities were started, there were only 5 subjects. I don't even remember one of them was theology, probably. One was, or philosophy and theology. One was history. One was language or literature, mathematics, maybe. I don't even remember what the original 5 were. Today in the US, there are more than 1,000. The 5 have proliferated, subdivided, and specialized into 1,000 sub-disciplines. Even for medicine, you have 50 specializations. For engineering, I don't know how many there are. You've got the civil, mechanical, electrical, electronic, and so forth and so on. And it goes on proliferating in specializations. And in psychology, you have the clinical and the abnormal and the biochemical, so many things like that. What happened with yoga happens with everything in life. As it develops form and gets organized, it proliferates and keeps specializing into more and more separate fields. In economics, we have so many fields like that. And the more it proliferates, the more each field develops its specialization. It acquires a specialized knowledge or a specialized skill or specialized practice. But the more it does that, the more it tends to separate itself from all the other disciplines. So once, 5 years ago, I was attending a major economics conference in Europe, and I met a professor of economics from Yale University. And we were driving in the car. He and his wife were driving in the car with me. And I wanted to start a conversation with him. We're on a tour. So I said, see, we're working on issues of employment we are going to be speaking about the issue of full employment. What is your view? He said, I'm a labor economist. That's not my field. I don't understand. Isn't labor economics about employment? If labor economics is not employment, then what were the man who says I'm an environmental economist or a financial economist or a business economist, or how many different fields there are? How can the labor economist not have a view on employment? But this is what happens. Things get so specialized that that it gets more and more divorced. It not only tends to get more and more divorced from the other fields of knowledge, but it also tends to get divorced from life. So when you go in to attend academic courses, they tend to be more and more divorced from the real world in which we're living. And in economics, very clear in many fields, the economics tells you this is the theory of supply and demand. And it's perfectly valid if these 20 conditions are met. The only problem is there's a little footnote. It's very hard to find any place in the world or any circumstance in which these 20 conditions are met. Here's the theory. It's unrelated to the real world. And that's what happens with academia. We called it the ivory tower. The universities became ivory towers of academia. What happened to the universities with terms of knowledge happened to the yogic disciplines with spiritual practice. They became so specialized in the method of trying to seek God. And they found along the way that, you see, if you're busy in a household, it's a big distraction. If you're working in the field and farming, it's a big distraction. If you're in commerce, you'll be getting quarrels and difficulties and dealing with money. Money's a big distraction. There's no question of politics. You can never be a political leader and be a yogi. So the best thing to do is you detach from all of these life activities and you focus on the thing that's really important, is getting union with God. And eventually what happened, the thing they did in order to make it easier to practice their yoga became the goal. The goal is detached from the world. And the yogas, by proliferating, they not only separated from each other, but they got more and more detached from the world in which the human being lives. So instead of bringing God into the world, bringing God into our life, and making God one with our consciousness or our consciousness with God in life, the more and more the tendency was to leave the world, to detach, to aspire for moksha, to go to the Himalayas, to take the sannyasi. So yoga became more and more separated from life. The highest knowledge humanity's ever had got more and more separated from the life in which the people were living. And therefore, the society itself lost its vitality and its strength. The decline of India didn't come out of an inherent weakness. It came because the strongest souls, the greatest minds, turned away from life towards the path that could get them to the divine, and all the vitality and energy of the great leadership went away, and the society got weaker. Why is all this important? Sri Aurobindo says this happens everywhere. This is today in education, we're trying to get education back in relevance to the society and the needs of students and the needs of the people. We're trying to make it people-oriented or relevant to our lives. Now, Sri Aurobindo says, when this great proliferation of knowledge through specialization reaches a certain point, it needs renewal. It becomes more and more detached from its central purpose. and it needs a renewal. And 100 years ago, little more than 105 years ago, he wrote this book calling on all the spiritual traditions, not only of India, but of the world, to go back to the original inspiration from which they started and try to find the central common principle that unites all spiritual practice, and to try to reunite it with the ultimate aim of yoga, which is to bring the divine into the world, not to escape from the world. In the Vedas, there's no talk about moksha, sannyasi, or escape. The goal is to call the divine God, the powers, down into our life. That's what the Vedic rituals are all about, as Sri Aurobindo has explained. So he says it's time for a synthesis. And what he created, the integral yoga he created, was a yoga of synthesis. And he said two things. First of all, whether you're going to do hatha yoga, pranayama, asana, raja yoga, whatever all it is, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, whatever it is, we must understand what is the central principle of spiritual practice, so that you can choose what works for you, and what works for you today may be different than tomorrow, and what works for one person doesn't work for other people. And what works in one situation doesn't work in another. We must go back to know the central principle of what yoga is. And we must know what the central purpose of yoga is. And there he said something which must have been known 5,000 years ago, but is essentially forgotten in the tradition, the way our education has forgotten its original purpose. He said, the purpose of yoga is not to escape life. The purpose of yoga is to make life divine. And for that, he came to the central issue. That's what he said when he said that all life is yoga. How can you say all life is yoga? When he says all life is yoga, it doesn't just mean that we should do everything yogically or convert everything in our life to yoga. He means the whole of life in the cosmos. Let's say, leave it to Earth right now, confine it to Earth right now. The whole of life on Earth is a yoga. Is a yoga of who? It's a yoga of the divine, manifesting itself and revealing itself in the world, in us. It's a yoga of self-discovery and self-unfolding of the divine powers in the universe. And that's when he says all life is yoga, he means whether or not we're doing yoga, whether we're in an ashram, whether we believe in God, whether we're devoted to any practice or not, whether we even know what the word yoga means, essentially, all living things are doing a yoga. Or he says, but in the animal kingdom, in the life kingdom, before man, it is a subconscious yoga of nature. Nature is doing the yoga. The animals and plants are not doing the yoga. It is nature. The yoga is the hidden divine potential in everything is gradually coming to the surface. And that's why life evolves. And that's why we have the proliferation of life forms on Earth, from the smallest primitive forms to the plant kingdoms and the animal kingdoms that gradually gave birth to the human. It's a yoga of nature. And he says, now for the first time, now means not today, in the last 10,000, 100,000 years, nature has given rise to a species that's our species, Homo sapiens, which is capable of consciously doing what nature's been doing unconsciously. There's been life on Earth for 4 billion years. And the human has only been here for a few 100,000, not even a million, not even a thousandth of the time, or 10,000th of the time. Because nature has given way to conscious mind. And that's the human, that distinguishes us from all the other species, is that we have a faculty for self-consciousness, thinking mind, which the animal doesn't have. The animal has a primitive physical mind, creature mind, that acts mainly through instinct. It doesn't decide what to do. It follows the instincts that are programmed into it by nature. And we do that also. That's the way our body works. But we've come to the point where we can think. And we can act not only just on instinct, we can act consciously. We can decide. And we can accelerate the long, slow process of nature that took billions of years. And that's what Narumaran has written. To abridge different lives in one birth was his definition of yoga. And that's true. For the human, what was supposed to take 1,000 or 100,000 births, by being conscious of it, we can abridge that time. We can abridge the number of births. Whether we do it in one life or 100 or 1,000 is only a question of intensity and print, but the principle is the same. So for the first time in history of this world, we have a species that's capable of consciously evolving consciousness, and consciously evolving forms for that consciousness. And that's what yoga is. The yogis invented, discovered means of consciously evolving. And they developed methods and forms and organizations for that evolution. And that kept the tradition alive and kept millions of spiritual experiences and records for us. But Sri Aurobindo says the time has come when we have to take all these methods and we have to remake them. We have to get to the essence and create the method that's really right for our times, not for 5,000 years ago or 1,000 years ago. And we have to find out not whether we should do this yoga or that yoga, but what is the central principle of yoga? What is the central purpose of yoga? And are we fulfilling it? And there's where he says, all life, the central purpose of yoga is not moksha. It's not to go off and go back to the one. It is to discover the one and bring the consciousness of the one into ourselves and into our life, to know we are the infinite, to know all souls are the infinite, to know there's an infinite beyond manifestation, and to realize and express that divinity in life, which is the divine life. And for that, we have to give up the limitation of the specialized fields. Each yogi, great yogi, developed something that worked for him, but we're not all like that. We're all different. So Sri Aurobindo's given us a yoga, the synthetic yoga, which enables us to use 100 different methods. The methods are secondary. What's important is to understand the process and the goal. And there he's very clear and emphatic and says, the goal of this yoga is not moksha. It's not the ego's pursuit of its own freedom, which is to take away the spirit from the world. The goal is to convert everything in our lives and everything in the world, reveal the divine in it, and express the divine in all of our life. So all life is yoga because there's nothing that's excluded from it. And all life is yoga because it is life itself that's trying to become divine. It's not just our individual life. It is the collective, the universal life on earth is trying to manifest the divine. The divine, rather, the right way to say it is, divine is trying to manifest itself on earth in the body, in the physical body. And that's why this must be a yoga of life. And he says in this later on in the aim of this yoga, it's not to make yoga, the aim of this is not to make yoga one of the goals of life. We have so many goals in life, and yoga is one of them, like exercise or good nutrition. It's to make it the only aim in life. To make it the only aim in life, not by detaching from everything else and giving up work or human relations or commerce or creativity or study or anything or art or anything else. That's not what he means. It is whatever we do, whatever path we have and whatever work we have, whatever comes to us, we should be able to convert that into an act of spiritual progress, to make everything we do a path to spiritual progress. Vani, are there some questions or comments that anyone like to ask a question?
Sir, there were no questions, sir, but there were a
No.
number of answers for what is yoga. I have pasted in the Zoom chat.
Read them out so I can also say.
Srijit says yoga is leading a divine life. Nedmar sir says abridgment of different lives in one birth. Janaki madam said union with divine. Senthil sir says whatever we do in life is actually an unconscious yoga, but yoga is a conscious life. And he has given quotes from Appa. The whole world is subconsciously doing yoga. As human beings, we can become conscious of that process and consciously evolve ourselves. When we acquire this perspective and have this as our aspiration, then life which we felt as an impediment and as a weight is converted into a means and an aid to our spiritual progress. Every circumstance in life reveals as an expression of our inner consciousness and an occasion for an inner growth. Every event becomes an opportunity to discover more of ourselves and of the divine within us and in the world around us. That's it, sir.
Any questions? All clear. Any comments?
Introduction is okay.
Sir,
Yes, yes.
sir, you were explaining about organization. So you are meaning to say that that thought can be organized, sir. When we discuss about the independence, Gandhiji, and during that section, you were explaining about the organization. So my question is that organization is the thought or the collective thought organized.
Organization takes place in so many ways. When we create the subject of mathematics, we organize all the ideas, or engineering, or agriculture. We organize all the ideas about agriculture. We separated into soil management, through pest management, through irrigation, through harvesting and processing, and so many specialized areas. We organize all that knowledge into a field of knowledge. That's an organization of knowledge, which we call a subject. When you're a farmer, you organize your action. You keep, here's my fertilizers, there's my seeds, there are my tools, my instruments, my tractor, my manure, and all of that. It's a physical organization. I keep this here, there, and all. When he works in the field, he organizes his actions. Before you irrigate, you should do the weeding first. Before you do the irrigation, you must do the plowing first. Before you do the planting, you must dig the holes and put the manure and so forth. It's an organization of action. The whole of, see, India became free in 1947, but the freedom movement could not run the country. Freedom movement was a movement of protest asking the British to leave, and everybody refusing to do this and refusing to do that. If everybody refuses to do things after the British leave, where will we be? India needed to create that freedom movement must become a government of the free leaders to govern the country after freedom. How is it going to be different? Now the British are gone. We don't have any tax collectors. Where are we going to get money? Who's going to build the bridges? Who's going to pave the roads? Who's going to run the schools? We need to organize all of the functions of the society in government. Who's going to make the laws? Who's going to enforce the laws? Everything the British were doing, we have to do now. We can't just boycott and make salt or make kadi. We have to organize the governance of the whole country. The government is an organization for that. And when government organizes, it starts with a few branches, and now it has 50 branches or something. And often the branches are acting at cross purposes with each other. Without coordination or without not even being aligned with the policy of the cabinet or the prime minister's goals, because it becomes unwieldy and specialized. Appa used to cite the example that when I first met him, that if you want to dig a bore well in what was then South Arcot district, Cuddalore, first you have to get a permission from the groundwater department for digging the bore well. Okay. If you wanted a loan for that, they require the permission from the groundwater people first. The groundwater people saying, you first get your permission from the bank for the loan, then we will give you the groundwater permission. The two were contradictory to each other. You could be running back and forth for months because there's no coordination between the different parts. Okay. Each is doing their job unrelated to the rest. So this is when organization becomes problematic. So he says, all life is doing yoga. Does it make any sense to us? It means we're all doing yoga, whether we like it or not.
Yes, sir.
Whether we know it or not. We're not very special. Everybody's doing yoga, then what's the big thing? But they don't even know what yoga is. Being alive on earth, being a human being on earth, having experiences and learning from your experiences. What do we learn? We learn, hopefully, how to avoid the mistakes that we've been making and how to get things done and how to do better with less, how to accomplish more with less energy or less materials or less money or any such thing. In other words, what's the difference between us or any child at the age of 15 or 18 or 20 and at the age of 50 or 60 or 70? Hopefully, we have learned something in life. Hopefully, through that experience, whether we succeeded or failed, we have learned something. You have to save for the future. Don't go squandering everything while you're young, because who's going to feed you and take care of you when you're too old to work? If you're a farmer, you have to put aside some of your crop as seed material for the next season. Because supposing this next crop fails, you need to have something in reserve for the time after that. We learn to save. What about your children when they grow up? Who's going to pay for their education? What happens if you need medical care? How are you going to take care of yourself? Be careful about who you join into partnership with, and don't start calling people names, because they'll get angry and take revenge against you later. You learn hundreds of things in life. Even the ordinary man, some of them ordinary people in the village, will be very wise because they have learned so many things that you do or don't do in life. And this is a thousands of year old civilization. It's part of the culture. Don't do this. The Americans are very young. We try everything and get into all types of trouble, like elect Trump as our president, without minimum common sense. All the education, but without common sense, because we haven't acquired the wisdom of life. When Appa says that there's a man like him in every Indian village who knows what he knows, even if he can't express it, even if he doesn't know it, he means that through these thousands of years of evolution, a knowledge has been acquired and people know how to live more wisely at their own level. They may not have technology, they may not have science, but they have learned something. What has been learned by the society over thousands of years can be learned in a lifetime. Even over thousands of years, most of the people don't know it. It's the one man, Appa said, one man in the village knows it. It's not every man in every village that knows it. It's 675,000 people. It's not it's not 1 billion people who have that knowledge, hopefully, ideally, or theoretically, anyway. If everybody has the knowledge that's there, if all of us have the knowledge Appa has, what would our lives be? If everybody has the knowledge that Appa has, what would be the accomplishments of India today? If Appa had been the prime minister of the country, India would not be what it was today, but he's only one person. If every person, if everybody had that knowledge, if every entrepreneur, if every teacher had his knowledge, if every businessman had the knowledge that he's been giving free, if every parent has that knowledge, where would we be? We'd be 1,000 years ahead, maybe more, no?
Yes, sir.
So we do learn something in our life. Somebody asked me, I was in Ukraine, and asked me some question about education. And I said, now at that time I must have been 70, 71. I said, I'm 71 years old. I have learned some things during my lifetime of really precious, valuable things. I've learned from my mistakes. I've learned from my successes. I've learned from other people who knew more than I did. When I think back on what I know now, whether you call it knowledge or wisdom or experience or anything else, I think almost all of that I could have learned when I was much younger, maybe before the age of 20, if only education was meant to help me learn what I'm going to learn through 50 years of experience. Then I would have started off at the age of 20 with what I know now. And I definitely feel more successful or more capable of accomplishment now than I was at 20. What would my life have been if I'd had this knowledge then? That is, if the society takes all the knowledge that people have at the end of their lives or later in their life and gives it to the youth at the beginning of the life, and we have a method for that, it's not yoga, we call it education. That's why Sri Aurobindo Appa calls education is the yoga of the society. To take the best we have and give it to the next generation, but we don't do it very well because we ourselves are not clear and conscious about what's the best we have and what we should tell the kids. We don't even know what we should tell them. We don't even know the knowledge we have, or those 675,000 people in the Indian villages have. If we, in the measure we do that, we make our progress conscious. We give the knowledge that's been acquired to the next generation consciously. And therefore, we would expect it to grow much faster and progress much more than we progressed or previous generations progressed. And in fact, the world is growing, changing, and progressing much faster than in the past because people are more educated, even with the silly education that we give them now. So what this is true for education is true for yoga. That's what Narumaran meant. Through lives, not through dozens of lives, through hundreds and thousands of lives, our soul acquires a knowledge. If we have that knowledge of the soul now, we can save two ways that we can avoid all. We're not trying to avoid lives. That's the sannyasi's idea. We can make the progress of 1,000 lives in one lifetime. We can accomplish what otherwise we'll accomplish in 100 births or in 100 years. We can accomplish every year. That's what Mother means by the birthday. So what is this yoga? It's to make conscious the process of our learning and our evolution. It is simply to have a perfect system for discovering knowledge about ourselves and the secret of our potentials and our capacities. So if you gain confidence at the age of 30 or 50 or 70, you can have the same confidence or the same knowledge or the same capacity at the age of 15 or 20. And that's what Abba says about education. What they get by the age of 30, they can have by the age of 12 or 14. Yes. All the essential knowledge can be given by then. Yoga is to abridge the learning process for the purpose of not academic knowledge or occupational knowledge, but the ultimate spiritual knowledge of our potentials, of how to evolve and become a conscious being, and how to reach our union with the divine, and how to allow the divine and become an instrument for the divine to act in our lives, to perfect our nature. Not to run away, not to give up, not to renounce, but to make everything perfect with a divine perfection. Because yoga is possible and union with the divine is possible because we are divine in the depths of our being. And that's the other contribution he made, which we were talking about in our meeting last night on psychological history. Saraswati was reading chapter 5 of Life Divine on the destiny of the individual. And according to the tradition, the goal of the individual is to get to moksha and dissolve back into the oneness, because the divine is only the oneness, is only the transcendent God. Sri Aurobindo says, the world is divine. The individual is divine. The transcendent is divine. They are three statuses of one reality. What we mean by becoming divine is to discover this, to discover that we are divine, that everybody else is divine, the world is divine, and there's an infinite divine beyond that, and that is the truth of our being. That's ourself. That they knew in the age of the Upanishads. So that divinity can express in our life and convert our human nature into divine nature and make life divine. So we start from the fact that the average person, the ordinary person, goes through his whole life without ever knowing what yoga is or even thinking of, oh no, I don't want any of that stuff, lives a life. He makes a progress in consciousness. He makes a very slow progress. What Mother says is typically, I don't know where she said, that the soul learns one thing in a lifetime. Makes one progress in a lifetime. Maybe Mr. Bennett learned not to indulge his wife. I'm not sure even Mrs. Bennett learned one thing in the lifetime. At the end of the life, she would be still be telling Mrs. Phillip, you see, I told you, sister, I was right all the time. She may do it the same and go through 10 lifetimes or 100 lifetimes to learn the value of non-initiative and all. I'm not sure. Darcy seems to have learned something, and Lizzie seemed to have learned something anyway. Mother says what the soul normally learns in a lifetime, the conscious soul can learn each year. And each birthday can be a rebirth. To learn in 1 year what we normally learn in a lifetime, we must do by being conscious. And there's a method for that. We call that method yoga. It has nothing to do with sitting cross-legged. Sri Aurobindo didn't sit cross-legged when he was meditating, except maybe when he was in Alipur jail. It has nothing to do with going into trance. Mother said that neither she nor Sri Aurobindo ever went into trance. They never lost contact with the world in which they lived, in which they were, when they were reaching the divine and expressing the divine. They were fully conscious of the world around them and fully conscious of the divine within them. The goal is to bring that consciousness out into the world. So the method of the tradition, very powerful, great methods for an early man or early woman discovering how to consciously evolve. Those are only the form of it. We have to get to the essence of it. And what he teaches in synthesis is, what is the essence of the process of becoming conscious? How can we practice and express that essence, not for 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes at night, not in the monastery or when we go to the temple or in the Himalayas, but at every minute?
Okay, sir.
To make every minute an opportunity and every act an opportunity to grow in consciousness. What nature is doing subconsciously, we do consciously. How to convert a subconscious act into a conscious act that gives us a progress, that raises our consciousness. As it raises our consciousness, it makes our acts more perfect. It makes our life more divine. This is what he means by all life is yoga. Whether we do it or not, our life is a yoga.
Yes.
Whether we want to take 1,000 births to realize what we can realize in one birth is the soul's choice, is our choice. Whether we want to go through all of the experiences of trying and making every possible mistake possible before we learn the solution to the puzzle, or whether we want the quick means of avoiding the problems and finding joy in each act and progress in each act and accelerating our process in each act. If I get a computer, I had a friend who, when he gets a new computer, he'll never read the manual, software or anything. He'll just be experimenting around more and more. Never read the manual. See, if you read the manual, you may save a lot of time.
Yes, sir.
This morning, I have a new printer that Vasuji was using. It ran out of ink. I was trying to change it. I'm looking for the manual. I can't find a manual. So I have to do trial and error to figure out how to operate this thing. So this method is how to learn the importance of everything that happens, how to make the most of everything that happens. And that's why Mother says everything that comes to us for only one reason. Everything that comes, not just to devotees, everything that comes to everybody comes only for one reason. For everybody, for most people, it comes 100 or 1,000 or times. It comes every day for years and years and years. It comes lifetime after lifetime until gradually they wake up. Mother says if you would like to do it quicker, if you'd like to enjoy the process more, If you'd like to accomplish the first time rather than the 100th time you do things, if you'd like to learn from your conscious practice rather than trial and error of doing it yourself and pride yourself, no, I never read manuals. I do everything. I never take advice. I never listen to anybody. I do everything myself. Of course, it takes a long time, and I do, but I don't depend on anybody. If we want, they have given us the shortest shortcut, the secret of the secret of how to convert our whole life into a conscious practice so that we get the maximum results with the minimum effort. And the maximum result is the maximum of joy. It's the maximum of peace. It's the maximum of power. It's the maximum of consciousness. Because consciousness is divine. Consciousness is the essence of divinity. Consciousness is that which is created and become the universe. Meaning, the more conscious we are, the more divine we are. The more we know the truth of our being and we know the divine in our being. And all the methods they give, whether it's non-reaction or silent speech or consecration or aspiration or rejection, these are all there's nothing new here. These have been methods that have been followed by man from very primitive times before he could speak. So sure, Krishna says in the Gita, you can become whatever you believe you can become. You go anywhere in the world and talk to successful people about the key is you have to have self-confidence. You must believe in it. If you don't believe in it, it won't work. They didn't read Gita. They didn't do yoga. They know from their experience, the people who accomplish are the people who believe in what they're doing. Sri Aurobindo and Mother have come to tell us, believe you can become divine. Believe you can progress in consciousness or aspire for it. Aspire, whatever you aspire for, you can accomplish. Whatever you have faith in, you can realize. Faith is a power. It's the divine power. It's a power of consciousness. To know, we grow up learning to be skeptical, learning to doubt everything. We're actually taught, don't be fooled into believing what you're told or what you think. It won't work. Those are all bogus things. They're all illusions and everything. You only believe what the scientist tells you. So we believe the scientist and and that works for us in some measure. And if the scientist says it's a hopeless case, we give up hope.
Yes,
Morris Goodman didn't give up hope when they said, say goodbye to him because in 3-4 days he'll be gone. You take him off the respirator and everything's over. He decided to walk out of the hospital within 12 months, which they could only laugh about if they laughed, because it's impossible as far as the science is concerned. But it's not impossible for yoga. It's not impossible for the divine. It's a known method, known even by the people who aren't religious, but who still have faith. So what we want to learn, all that we're talking about in our daily calls, and all that he's talking about in the book, in this book and the other books, is how to make our lives conscious. And in this book, he talks about, in our discussions, we roam around from any topic that comes up and any problem. And from the problem, we say, well, how can it be solved? By consciousness, by being more conscious. Here, he goes through the different traditional paths of yoga and how they develop the powers of human consciousness to extraordinary length. And after discussing the yoga of works and the yoga of the knowledge and the yoga of devotion, he comes in the last part of the book to the integral yoga. And he says, it's fine, you can use any of these methods. You can follow any of these paths. But ultimately, if you really want to realize the divine, if you really want to accomplish what your soul is here for, we need to use all the methods. Meaning, we don't need to, we can use any method, but we need to develop not just our mind or our heart or our vitality or our body. We need to develop everything, because the goal is not to escape from life. The goal is to bring the divine here and to divinize our life. We have to divinize our mind. We have to divinize our emotions. We have to divinize our vital impulses. We have to divinize the cells of the body. So all methods have a value. The only thing is we shouldn't mistake is to think that the method is the thing. We can use any method and when it works for you, and then follow another method. But remember the goal. The goal is to bring the divine here and manifest the divine here. And for that, they give the knowledge. All life is yoga means it's the greatest knowledge in a very simple phrase. Everything that happens to you is an opportunity for spiritual progress, without exception, no matter how pleasant or unpleasant it is. What a great knowledge to have. You mean that I can make a progress now? I applied for a job. They asked me to come at 10 o'clock and they keep me waiting for an hour and a half. What progress can I make? I've wasted an hour and a half. No, there's a progress I can make during that hour and a half. There's a progress that I can make that will either get me this job or get me a much better job. If I understand the relationship between my consciousness and the waiting and the job. And everything's like that. They have converted the whole of life into an adventure that, taken on the right path of the sunlit path, becomes an adventure of consciousness and joy. That's the call that the divine, that Mother and Sri Aurobindo are giving to us, that the divine is giving to humanity. And what he wants to teach us in this book is, for those of us, we're now doing it in our own way according to problems we have and solving a problem or something. If we want to understand it fully, what we're doing and why it works and how it can work better, there's a greater knowledge here. And he starts, this is the introductory 5 chapters. We're on just the beginning of it.
There is a question. Is yoga only for the individual? Is there a collective yoga for the society? Because individual is formed by evolved consciousness of the society.
Yoga is, what we mean by yoga is a conscious method followed for self-perfection. That's what we mean by the term, practically. The society is not using a spiritual method for its self-perfection. But that's why I quoted Senthil what Appa had said. It's his own phrase. Education is the yoga of the society. The conscious method that the society is using to try to perfect itself, meaning to perfect its members, is what we call education. It may have different parts. It may have a technical education, intellectual education, social skills, business education, leadership skills. It may have hundreds and hundreds of branches of it, but it is essentially, education is the parallel for the society of what we're doing for the offering, what yoga offers for the individual. But it happens at a much lower level. What your comment is, that after all, the individual is formed by the evolution of the consciousness of the society, is a half-truth. It's a truth, but it's a half-truth. The truth is The society is formed by the consciousness of the individuals in it. That is, those who are really individuals, I don't mean just members of the society. This is what Sri Aurobindo writes in, not only in Life Divine, we read it yesterday in Ideal of Human Unity as well. The growth of the society is done by the conscious individuals in the society, meaning those who are more conscious than the society, those who learn and know something that's not taught in education, that's not practiced widely. Those people who are aware of opportunities or methods or truths that the society has not yet accepted. Those who proclaim a universal declaration of human rights and say this is essential or sustainable development goals for the future of the world, or we must have equality. These are individuals who are making the society evolve, not by sitting down and self-analysis, by accepting higher values, higher ideas, translating them into law, fighting freedom struggles for them. It is the pioneering individuals, whether it's an Elon Musk, his company is now, I read it today, 3 years ago, they were, even the financial experts and all were saying that Tesla may be closed in 3 years. It may never make a profit. Today it says that Tesla, the value of Tesla, the share value of Tesla is equal to, is more than the combined value of General Motors, Ford, Toyota, and I think Volkswagen, which are the 4 largest or among the 4 largest in the world. His value, these are huge companies that GM has been around for 100 years. This may be their 100th birthday this year. And he's done it. 3 years ago, they thought that role of the individual is there. So what you say is true. It's not true that the society creates the individuals. Society prepares everybody up to the level of an average that they can give. The individual is one who goes beyond what they get from the society, and by developing further and expressing, helps the society to grow. So it's a combination. The society helps individuals or helps people acquire their average, what the society possesses. That's the educational system. Some acquire more and some less, certainly. But the real individuals, the outstanding individuals with a capital I, are those who change the educational system, who change the political system, who change the commercial system and the business and the life in the world, and change the society through that. So it's a complementarity between the individual and the collective. Your question is wonderful. That's the value and why education is so important, and why Appa was so dedicated to it, Sri Aurobindo also. And Appa's, if we can change the educational system, we can make the society evolve in 10 years, what they will normally do in 50 years. The knowledge is already there. The question is how to get it into that system. We need that's a yoga of the society. It's not just the education. Appa wrote the theory of social development. You could call it the yoga of society.
Education is the yoga.
Education is the yoga of the society, but how to make the society use that education, that's a yoga too. That's what he called the process of social development. And he wrote 1,000 principles of social development 45 years ago, original theory of social development that doesn't exist today. The society doesn't know how it develops. It's not conscious. Society, education is one method. But if the society decides, oh, you mean there's a yoga for us too, and wants to take it up, Appa's given the principles for that. That's what we're trying to communicate in the World Academy without anybody knowing it. But that's the basis for it, to make it conscious. And why not? Your point is very well. Why not in future? Why shouldn't the whole society do it? First of all, we need the individuals who do it. When enough individuals say, The real purpose here is to be conscious in our evolution. And the more conscious we are and the more we seek what the divine wants to express through us, the more our life flowers. And all the things we were seeking so hard and working so hard for become so easy. And the whole world and the whole life around us becomes so much better. Why shouldn't everybody do this? And those, of course, who feel that way go and want to communicate and share their inspiration to others. He also says that one soul becoming conscious radiates out that vibration and makes other people aware of the opportunities to consciously evolve. And aren't we all here because Appa did that? How many lives he has changed and how many lives we can change? Not so much through, Appa didn't go out canvassing. No? He never went and addressed a single audience. He never even put his books into the bookstores to sell. No, he did it inside by developing everybody he met, by trying to help everybody he met grow consciously, so that each devotee could become a center of consciousness. Each devotee's house can become a center, and each relationship that we have can spread this consciousness. That's what Mother and Sri Aurobindo did. That's why they never wanted advertising. They never wanted to bring millions of people here. They never wanted to perform miracles that would attract people for the wrong reason. That is the method that ultimately will make the society conscious. The great knowledge that India has, the great advantage India has, I may find it difficult to communicate to you. You don't know what a handicap the American has. We have to learn from scratch what's there in your culture and your tradition.
So I had a question, sir. So some people have asked me, those who have wanted to know more about Sri Aurobindo and this, and they've never heard. I mean, some people have come to the ashram, they've bought the books and all, but they've not understood. But whenever I talk about Appa and his works and things like that, like this American friend, colleague who I was talking to, he's like, how can I get this for, like, why isn't it known all everywhere? So, people just want to, so my question was, I totally understand like what Sri Aurobindo and Appa, and there is no questioning there. How do we hasten the process of getting things to know, sir? So whenever I meet people now, I don't push my knowledge or anything. But whenever somebody talks to me about a problem, in a subtle way, I talk about. Then they ask, where do these principles come from, and then I tell. But when people don't have access to and most of it is in Tamil. So another handicap, because for people who don't know the language, like there are people from North India, and I have friends from Bengal, North India. They all would love to know more about how Appa interprets Sri Aurobindo's philosophy and how beautifully he is translated. There are many English books I know, but many people don't know such a thing exists. It's not available in Amazon. In YouTube also, if you search easily, you will not get it because it's a very private channel kind of a thing. Nowadays, you can get some. So how do we help these people so that I know the principle behind this is one man's perfection, but there if people want to know, how do they go about this?
See, this is what it's a very good question. This question came up a few days ago, and I asked, what is service to Mother?
Right.
What is service to Mother? What Appa is giving us, what they are giving us, is a method for our own progress. Our applying this in our life to solve our problems is essentially applying it to benefit, to help the ego fulfill what it wants. Where our real progress will come by outgrowing the ego, by outgrowing the selfishness and self-centeredness of the ego, and discovering the divine in others through service to them. So Appa has given that method. He never insists on it. He never, because it's up to each individual. Service to mother is yoga. The difference is it's a yoga that tries to give to others. And he gave these very simple methods doing book service. You mentioned translating Appa's books into other Indian languages. It's a great opportunity. Writing articles, making the House of Meditation center. Anything, there are two ways, simple ways. First way, fundamental for everybody, is we should live it. We shouldn't be going around proselytizing and telling everybody else how they can solve all their problems. Our living it and applying it in our own life is service to mother. Sincerely taking to the principles and practicing it, because consecration is constant service. Consecrating anything we do is to offer it to mother so it becomes divine, it becomes elevated, it becomes not just the act of the ego or the lower consciousness or the subconscious or the habit. To become more conscious is itself to be serving and being an inspiration to others. The complement to that is when we actually take up work. Appa created, what did he do? 1970, October 17th. He created the Mother's Service Society. After being here for about 10 years and knowing what mother was and reading all the books and practicing and trying and consecrating everything in his life and how he learned all of this by himself and found the truth of it. And he, even back then, 50 years ago to the year, he said, this must go to others. And he created Mother Service Society. What he had in mind at that time, we started in agriculture. He started in rural development. And in 10 years, rural development spread all over the country, is a fact. Started from the time he started the society. And then he wanted to give ideas for the national development. And we worked on it. And then he wanted to give ideas for business development because business is a main sector of the modern society. And then on education. And then he wanted to go to the international level, starting the International Commission. And then we ended up with the World Academy and Fields of Knowledge and Education through World University Consortium, and starting Primrose School to do it and show the methods in our own school. And in between, when he had nothing to do, he wrote 80 or 100 books and spent all the spare minutes of the day and the night talking to and trying to share his knowledge and make it a personal gift to people, to develop people so they could go out and share the knowledge with others and help other people develop. His whole life was service. His whole life was dedicated to that. He had the wisdom, and I say it because I never met anybody who had that wisdom, including myself, for sure. He had the wisdom to understand the process by which you do this. And he always started in the most humble, simple way. Why he spent hours and hours with me, I told you that my aunt could never, why are you wasting time talking to that young guy? He doesn't know anything. You can spend your time talking to me. He spent time with many people who, people would, why you talk to her? Doesn't matter. What are you doing? He knew the process of growing life and growing consciousness and dedicated every moment of his life to it, in the hope, in the aspiration that we would ask the question you're asking. That we would ask, okay, we're getting so much, but what about service? What can we do? Our service is a higher form of yoga. Our service is a more conscious form of converting our life into something higher. But whether we do it through service or whether it's serving the family or serving the children or serving the world or doing it in education or doing it in business or doing it in literature or writing or translating or whatever it is, we can each do, and we can each progress through that. Abba didn't ask us to do it because the world needs it. He asked us to do it because we need it and we will grow by it. And so many devotees have seen by doing that service, their whole life has grown because it makes us think of something beyond ourselves. So your question is wonderful. That is, Mother and Sri Aurobindo didn't come here because they needed to practice yoga. Their whole life was a service to humanity. They did the yoga for humanity. They already live in that consciousness. They don't need to be on earth at all. So they've given us the example, and Appa is giving us the example. And but we all know, it's easy to read something and then talk and tell somebody else about it. It doesn't mean we practice it. It doesn't mean the practice of it is the most important thing. To be sincere to that knowledge, which is very challenging. So the first priority is not to go out and tell others. There are people immediately go out and start, telling others and starting centers or starting campaigns. Mother had, when I went to the ashram, 71, there was a man working in the dining room. Very humble, I forget his name now. He had a brother who was also in the ashram 30 years, 20 years earlier, and as long as Sri Aurobindo was there. When Sri Aurobindo left, he left the ashram and went to America and became a guru and became very famous there. The name will come back to me. He was even running meditations in the United Nations. Anyway, and all. See, enough of this yoga and everything. Let me go out and become a famous man. He became world famous, becoming a yogi. The point is, his brother who stayed in the ashram, who was really trying to do something. So what we do outwardly with others should be an expression of what we've realized or a means of realizing it. I keep telling everybody on the calls because I don't think people believe me. When we have these conversations, I probably learn more than you do from them. By trying to understand it and communicate it to another, we also can grow. That's different than fooling ourselves to think we know everything and everybody should listen to us. So service has a role. What service each of us can do and how we can benefit by it, there's an infinite amount to do. I've already told you at least 100 projects are there waiting for people, the right soul, to come and say, I want to do the service. And Appa never asked, it was not advertising for people to come. There is work to do in the world, and he's opened it up in so many fields. It's mind-boggling to me because who's to do all of this? Where are all the people? In which, whether it's this generation or the next generation, he has laid out the work for at least 100 years. I think it's too little time. He's given us the projects. I wish to be able to pass on at least the ideas and help as many people as possible, encourage as many people as possible to take it up, whatever their capacity or inclination is, because it's so broad. That's what society should be. We are here to offer that service and to work with those who feel drawn to it, whether it's at the global level or the national level or the local level or in a school, starting a school like Jay Velu and Tilakam have done. Pure service. to mother. There's so much we can do. Or running a business consciously and practicing the methods and then finding a way to communicate them. Writing books in English literature, like Janani is working on. In all fields, there's things to be done. So, as yoga, it can only be done. The service itself can only be done as yoga, a form of yoga in which we're thinking of reaching out and identifying with the world around us rather than our own small or individual life. And that's what Appa pushed me. He pushed me off the cliff so many times. Get out, do this, do this, do this. I would have never done it by myself. I'm just lucky that he pushed and didn't mind if I shouted a little on the way. Doesn't matter, just do it. He could push, but we must choose.
So he found such a wonderful student in you. One of the truest.
It's very nice to hear that. I know what he found. but anyway.
The other problem is whenever, the whole world is obsessed with these quick fix, like you were saying, it starts with a meditation. I attended one of these camps of a very famous, these yogic thing. And, it was like, you start with the meditation, and at the end of 4 days, the people they said, how are you feeling? Everybody said, I am very enlightened, I've reached this. So I was like, so that is the kind of quick fix solution the people are looking for. And that is why this yoga is so, and once people really understand it, I don't think they will ever leave it. It's not one of those quick fix things, where you just come 4 days camp and 4 days you feel you are enlightened. It's not, and you at the end of 4 days you go back and forget it. It's not like that. That is why, the numbers may be lesser, but it has more impact. Kind of.
The numbers are not the issue.
Right.
The value is the issue.
Right.
I did the quick fix with TM. Leslie and I did it. It didn't take us long, even when we were with Maharishi, to see there must be something beyond this. An adventure of consciousness came, and it came and found us. The quick fix has its value. If I hadn't had the quick fix, I may never have gone beyond it.
Right.
For each person, there's something that can help them on their way. Whether it succeeds or fails, even if they only get disillusioned by it. There are people who have had 10, 20 gurus. Even Satprem, after he knew Mother, he was going out and having a tantric guru so that he could learn more of his own foolishness. And say, Mother, I don't know why I'm going around looking for anybody else. Everything is here. Mother was polite enough to never to ask him that question. But he smiled sympathetically. Yes, you've learned something, maybe.
There's no force in this yoga, sir. There's nothing to bind you that you do this or you have to be here. You can go, do, come back, and you can take off from where you left off, kind of.
Yoga is not, you cannot force anybody to be conscious. Life can force us to become conscious. We don't need, life will force us to become conscious by presenting to us all the consequences of our actions. That's our compulsion. Mother doesn't need to do that. Mother's trying to save us from the compulsions of life by making it as easy as possible. But we do court the adventure of doing it ourselves. And as long as that's there, we learn from it.
Right.
He draws in the chapter an analogy, which I think is helpful. What science has done with the physical world, yoga tries to do psychologically. What science has done is studied minutely the processes of nature and figured out how we can harness those methods of nature more effectively. Say today we grow crops with 10 times or 20 times the yield that it happens in nature. Even 100 times the yield is known, or 50 times the yield. The farmer growing tomato here gets 8 tons per acre. In California, there are farmers getting 80 tons, and in Israel, 200 tons. What has he done? He's not invented something. He has seen the process by which nature grows the crop, makes it grow, and how to improve on that and how to accelerate that. Oh, it wants fertilizer, we can give more fertilizer. It needs water, we can give it needs a better soil or better sunlight, we can do all of that. And we accelerate the natural process. Benjamin Franklin figured out that that lightning that's hitting the kite is electricity. It's and that electricity, if you can get it down here, you can make it turn a windmill or a fan or whatever it's going to do. Science has mobilized the natural forces of nature and magnified their power infinitely. We can't measure the. So instead of shouting to reach the people on the other side of the world, we can pick up a cell phone and do it, all with the laws of nature. We haven't changed the laws of nature at all. We've learned what the laws are and seen we can get thousands of times more than nature is getting from those laws when it does it subconsciously. And this is yoga. We live and man gets results. Man has been progressing and man has been living for so many thousands of years and getting results. The speed with which he gets results and the amount of results he gets is very little. So it takes him 100 or 1,000 lives to get a result that he could be getting in a lifetime. The result we want is the psychological knowledge of our own capacities and the development of the spiritual endowments that are there in everybody. The primitive man doesn't know that there's electricity. Say, then sand has been a useful raw material for humanity for thousands of years. In the Egyptian times, they used sand to make glass and bricks. Today, we use sand to make silicon chips that run computers. Sand has been there all the time. Oh yes, sand is very valuable. I can get more bricks. Or I can run the world on. And now the solar energy has been coming to the earth for 4 billion years. Only now in the last 20, 30 years, and only now, especially in the last 5 or 10 years, we're able to harness so much of solar energy that in another 30 years, we can run our cars on it. We can run everything on it. We don't need the other at all. And it's free. Once you build it's free. So yoga is that. We have the power in us. We're using it. We're using the sand to make bricks. The sand of our consciousness, our thoughts, our feelings, our impulses, our urges, our reactions can be made into diamonds. They're worth it. They can be forged into sources of joy and light and truth. Our thoughts, we don't have to embarrass ourselves by talking about the quality of our thoughts that are running all day in the mind. And what are we using this instrument called mind for? And how much are we using the power of thought that nature has given us? And what are we doing with it? And what are we discovering and accomplishing? It's not 1,000. Yoga teaches us how to use the power of our thought, how to use the power of our emotions, how to use the power of our vital energy, how to bring peace and silence and patience and equality as great, great powers of consciousness like the solar energy and the electricity that can accomplish anything. So yoga is a parallel in the individual subjectively, what science is doing in the world objectively. That's all. It's the new level of science. It's the science of life and it's the science of consciousness, which science hasn't discovered yet. They don't even know what consciousness is. They still think it's the chemicals and electricals in the body. So there's nothing supernatural about this. We know we have thoughts. Nobody has to convince us. We know we have emotions. We know we have beliefs and doubts and faith and fears. We just haven't been taught the methods by which we can convert all this raw material that we're now using as bricks. Some of those bricks we're throwing at other people. Instead of bricks, we can convert it all into something of infinite value for our progress and for the benefit of everybody else. That's what he means by yoga. Not a yoga to run away from life, a yoga to perfect our lives and the life and make everybody else's life a lot easier too in the process. And he says they've come for a synthetic yoga, for a synthesis of yoga that looks at the truths in all of the forms, the truths in all of the practices, and makes those truths available to us. And we can use all of them. We don't have to decide whether we want a bhakti yoga or I want jnana yoga. No, I'm going to be a tantric or anything. All of these are natural forces of nature and consciousness that are in all of us. We can use each of them. We can use all of them. We can use them at different times for our progress. Each of us can frame our own yoga according to our nature, according to our aspirations. But whatever we do, we can be multiplying our achievements and progressing so much more that every year will feel like the richness of a lifetime. And then they will say, why don't you do it every day? And sometimes it will happen that the day itself, my God, one day has become so rich. I've learned so much. It's so valuable. If every day was like that, what would my life be like? Sometimes I feel that after one of our discussions. If the whole day is like this discussion, where will we be in a month? It's been happening. Even the 1 hours are getting more and more. So in summary, he says, the purpose of the world, let alone yoga, the purpose of the world is manifesting the divine. The world is divine in the process of evolution and manifestation. That manifestation and fulfillment, God wants the fulfillment of expressing itself in the world, not just outwardly in terms of beautiful flowers and birds or beautiful mountain scenery or something, but inwardly in our self-fulfillment of joy, knowledge, power, peace, harmony, goodwill, goodness, the sweetness of goodness, delight of existence in every contact we have, in every person we meet, in every experience that comes to us. And he says, the goal is to harmonize the inner and the outer. The scientist has figured out a lot of improvements can be made in the way we do things outwardly. And we can get a lot more efficiency and we can create a lot more wealth. The problem is it doesn't mean that we're a lot happier. Yoga is the inner correspondence to that. What we do outwardly to make the world materially successful, we can do inwardly to make our life psychologically and spiritually successful and full and rich and multiply the results with the same magnitude or greater magnitude than science has multiplied our physical powers of communication, transportation, production, and everything else. From 10,000 cars a year, car manufacturing in the US went to 1 million cars a year in 20 years. In 20 years, if we can multiply our psychological satisfaction and our psychological capacity and our inner fulfillment by 100 times or all, what did I say? It went from 10,000 to 1 million. That's 100 times. Wouldn't it be worthwhile? That's what they want, nothing else. That's what they want. And the more we do it inwardly, the more it will express outwardly. The goal is not for us just to do it individually. The goal is, as Senthil was saying, that it will go. It will automatically go to others. And then if we can do it in the field of education, if we can take our self-experience and Appa, that's what Appa has been talking to Vidya for years and wrote his 200 pages on, how to convert this knowledge into the educational system where we are making our students more conscious and doing it with that aim in mind. It doesn't mean we're talking about yoga and consecration, for teaching them about how to be more conscious in their own lives, what will the next generation in India be? My God, if they know what you learn at the age of 40 or 50, and they know that at the age of 15, then what will India be in another 20 years? You don't have to do anything. We don't need any help from anybody. The knowledge is here. How do we get the knowledge to the world? There's only one way to do it. We have to make it real in ourselves first. In the measure we make it real in ourselves, we'll be able to communicate it to others, and our service will be really meaningful that way. That's why Appa didn't ask, go ahead and distribute the books everywhere and canvas for Mother and Sri Aurobindo, or even for his books. Do it, practice it in your life. Every time somebody came and asked for service, are you consecrating? What are you doing? Make it real. Our making it real is the service, and is the most important thing we can do to communicate it and give it to others. This is what he means by yoga. It is the yoga of self-fulfillment for the capital S. It's the yoga of divine fulfillment for everybody. And even in imagination, I can't imagine anything that there could be beyond this. And they have said this is really the purpose of everything. The best possible thing is there. And every minute we can do it. So this is chapter 1 of Life in Yoga of Sri Aurobindo. And he's offering us everything we could possibly need to know in this book. Any questions, any comments, anybody? Enough.
I have a question, sir.
Good.
Sir, when you are explaining about the consciousness, that time I got a hint that Appa writes that to solve a problem, there is a need of a rise in the consciousness. And when I just hear your explanation, I find that I just see how the problem gets solved. One, that when I pray to Mother, the problem gets solved. So I have a contact with mother consciousness. So there is a rise in consciousness and the problem gets solved. Otherwise, second level is when I when I give up my opinion or my judgment, I see the response happening outside. Again, raising the consciousness. And third level is when I just understand the thing that 2 days back you are explaining for Vishnu's question about inner outer correspondence. That time you told to see a relevance, a correspondence with me and a person and the other person. So that time I found a correspondence, and that it's there, I got a solution for the problem. Is it a mental decision or a clarity in the mind also a raise in the consciousness, sir?
You can raise the consciousness through a decision in the vital to be peaceful or generous, in the heart to have goodwill, in the mind to not think, or to think and be aware, or in the soul to consecrate even when you're eating your food or speaking a word or walking or doing the most routine act, whether it's cooking in the kitchen or filling out something in the workplace. Every moment is an opportunity to be more conscious than we are, because we act in habit. We act out of habit. When I brush my teeth in the morning, I don't think about the brushing the teeth. Sometimes after I finish, I wonder, did I brush my teeth? Because I'm doing it out of subconscious habit. I'm missing the opportunity to make a progress in the physical act. That's there. I walked how many steps today? How many did I consecrate? How many breaths did I take? How much did I consecrate? How many words have I spoken? How many of them did I consecrate? How many times did I put the food in my mouth or drink something? Everything is an opportunity to raise our consciousness, because everything we do normally, we do out of habit. We do it unconsciously. It doesn't mean we don't know that we're talking or eating. It means we're lost in the act. To consecrate something means you must be aware that you're acting and offer it to mother rather than simply doing it. How many opportunities there are in the day? The whole life is like that. When I wake up, Appa's test is when you wake up in the middle of the night, if the first thought is of mother. When you wake up in the morning, if the first waking thought is mother. It means you're saturated at one level, the hourly consecration. So everything is an opportunity. You're right to think like Sherlock Holmes instead of like Lestrade, or is to be more conscious, to ask a question rather than just make up an answer, is to be more conscious. To have a doubt is easy. To have faith takes more effort. So our whole existence is an existence of consciousness. At every minute we're acting, whether we're physically moving or not. The thought is an act. The refusal to think is an act. The feeling is an act. The sensation is anything can be consecrated. That's why Appa didn't have to leave his chair in order to work in the world. Everything is here. Whatever he handled with that perfection. Whatever he did with that perfection. Whoever he related to, he related as if they're the most important thing in the world for that time. To do it as consciously as possible, not to take anything for granted. How many opportunities we have. What you have said is absolutely true. What I mean is, if you have listed 4, we can make it 100 or 400. Everything is like that. I have not explained, and we will do it next week, but we are subconsciously conscious. We're doing all these things, but we're not doing them in the way they mean to be conscious. Consecration is to make our ordinary, routine, habitual, characteristic life conscious. When I go back and listen or watch a video of a speech I have given earlier, I'm aware of things that I wasn't aware of when I was doing it, because I wasn't fully conscious. I'm not fully conscious of how I use gesture with my hands or with my head or anything else. Everything is like that for us, no? So all life is yoga. All life is an opportunity at every minute. If we see mother every minute, if we see her, if she appears before us every minute, meaning we're conscious. If every time I see somebody, I see mother in them, upon number of times he used to say, you're talking like that, mother is standing right beside you. I don't know. Mother may always be standing right beside me. Mother standing, that's what Sri Aurobindo said. Act at every minute as if mother is watching, because she is indeed always present. If I don't know that, then I'm unconscious.
Thank you, sir.
It's a wonderful question and a wonderful answer you have yourself given. I'm only just trying to stretch it out to, that's what he means, all life is yoga. That's what he means. All life and everything that happens is an opportunity to be more conscious. And they've given us the method, which we know so much, and there's so much more to know. And they not only give us the method, they give us the power, and they give us the consciousness. Call her and she'll make you more. Calling her is yoga. Calling her and asking for her consciousness, asking for her strength, asking for knowledge, praying for it, offering the act to her. Mother, I don't know what to do. I don't know why, I don't know what to do. Consecrate it to her instead of relying on my knowledge or my skill or my experience.
Okay.
Great.
Sir?
Yes.
Sir, in business analogy, Appa has given one example. That is, the unused part is infinite. The used portion is finite. So I thought I can share this. For CS, he's written this. So we will take that unused portion is infinite. We have to find out.
And you know where the unused portion, who's the unused portion? We're all the unused portion.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. every individual, every person.
Every person and every moment, we are the infinite, unused infinite. It's a very nice way to put it. Thank you today. Okay. I think enough for today. There's no other question, Bonnie? Okay, we've had quite enough. Great. Continue tomorrow and we'll go back to synthesis next week.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.